saya terpilih melalui program ini melalui kajian saya dalam bidang fizik. Kajian itu sebenarnya dia berkaitan dengan quantum physics dan juga quantum levitation. Levitation tu macam dia superconductors. Jadi kita menyejukkan superconductor itu dan superconductor itu boleh terapung.
Sebelum ni saya telah melengkapkan research untuk diploma saya di sekolah ini. Saya melakukan transformation of microalgae with green fluorescent protein. So apa yang saya buat adalah green fluorescent protein adalah protein yang wujud dalam jellyfish yang membuatkan dia glow in the dark. So bila kita pancarkan ultraviolet rays, the protein will glow in the dark. So what I did, saya letakkan protein tu dalam algae. Dan bila algae tu dipancarkan ultraviolet rays, dia akan glow in the dark. So antara banyak sebab you boleh guna algae tu untuk detect pollution dalam water. So katakan banyak algae, so water is clean. If less algae, so it's not so clean. And you can also use the algae to track biological processes and everything like that. Yeah.
Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Anda sedang menonton agenda Awani secara langsung dari studio Awani di Bukit Kewangan, Kuala Lumpur. Dan malam ini antara topik yang secara peribadinya kegemaran saya dan tapi juga satu tunjang editorial di Astro Awani, iaitu pada inovasi dan juga kemajuan sains. Dan dalam konteks itu saya ingin berbicara dalam bahasa Inggeris kerana saya ada tamu khas. I would like to welcome Dr. Meghan Groome, the Director of K-12 Science Education at the New York Academy of Sciences. She has so many other portfolios, but we'll go to them as we go on in the discussion. I would like also to welcome Professor Tan Sri Dr. Sharifah, Hapsah. As you all know, UKM is now coming out very, very strongly, and one of the strong points for today was we finally see the officiation of a very important workshop that we have always talked about having a Nobel laureate from Malaysia, but a lot have been debated. But if you look at concrete steps taken to do something about it, so I think UKM in Bangi is a good place to start, because you can go there, you can send a message on Twitter to Professor Tan Sri Dr. Sharifah, and maybe she'll open doors for you to go there. But today, 80 lucky students got to sit there with 20 of their teachers and 20 young researchers and scientists from the country, sitting around with top international scientists, I think 10 of them, and under the care and supervision of New York Academy of Science, which is a nearly 200 years old institution. There's a lot to say about New York Academy of Science. I met and got to know about New York Academy of Science and their partnership with Malaysia in Lindau in Germany when I was there about 2 years ago. But for tonight, we're going to look at how do you have the mindset of a Nobel laureate, for example. Can you really groom this mindset? And if we already have a preset mindset not conducive to that mindset, can we really unlearn and learn again? So I'm going to divide it into a few sectors, because a lot of those 80 are also the proud homegrown for UKM from the Pintar program, Permata Pintar. So they are already selected. But maybe we can start with them, because if anybody stands a chance to become the first Nobel laureate for the country, they probably would come from the Permata Pintar program, for example.
I hope so.
Yes.
But
So,
it may not be.
yeah, it may not be. But
clever kids.
just in case we hedge our bet on them, how do you see it going? Because you've been grooming them at the early levels, but maybe the missing link is for them to picture themselves forward like 10 or 20 or 15 years and see themselves there receiving the award from the royals of Sweden. But the pathway there, maybe after UKM, is a bit hazy. But now with this program, a cradle to career kind of marking, it gives them a better view, and also for those involved in grooming them. Your point of view?
Well, we call our program Nobelist Mindsets,
Okay.
from Nobel. The idea is that from you just can't say I want to be a Nobel laureate. You have to have some kind of systematic way of thinking about how you're going to get there. And I think this is what this program is supposed to do. Like you say, of course, our gifted kids would hopefully have an edge because they learn very fast, they imbibe things very fast, they're interested in research, they're interested in fundamental science, in mathematics, chemistry, physics. These are the areas that the gifted children are interested in. So that's a good start. Yeah. But it's not enough. It's also the whole environment of their teachers being able to help them, of them being able to be in touch with people who are doing research, which we already give in UKM, because each of the gifted student has got a mentor, a professor they work with, and already they work on the research together with the professors. So they are in that kind of environment, but it's not done in a systematic way where they all interact together. The scientists can help the teachers, and the teachers learn that this is the way to help the students. At the moment, they just think about facilitating their learning. Yeah. But now we are not saying just about the learning of certain subjects, but hey, put yourself in the shoe of a Nobel laureate. You want to be a Nobel laureate. How do you get there? And I think what they are helping us do is to get this going in a very systematic way. So maybe Meghan should take over from here and tell us what they are doing with our students.
Yeah, I think in some ways it's easy for a student, a young scientist who is interested in science to say, I would like to get a Nobel Prize in the same way an athlete may say, I would like to win a gold medal in the Olympics. Now, of course, when you're 15 or 16 years old and you're dreaming very big, it is very difficult to then say, well, what do I as a high school student do? And it does start with thinking about what are the problems that I would like to solve in science? And many of the students thought about solving diseases, issues of water, and also biodiversity issues. And we said, well, what can you do with these big ideas in science? And they did think very big. And then we said, okay, well, so here's this big idea in science. Let's bring that back to a researchable question. What is something that you can do in your research lab that you currently have access to? And mentor with one of the very bright young scientists at UKM, and go from high school and think about university or undergraduate, and from university or undergraduate, what are the experiences that they should have there? And then we talked with them about how do you choose a good university to do your graduate work in? And then from there we worked and transitioned to working with the young scientist and said, so think about your laboratory as a business. Think about what are your goals and objectives, and how do you put out very large research questions and then work backwards to say, how do I fund these research questions? How do I hire people in my lab who have the same goals that I do? And so while it's very difficult when you think about from cradle to career, you know, right from a very young child all the way through to actually having a job, it does first start with a dream, and then it's a pretty systematic, stepwise process. But it always needs to go back to what is that big goal? What is the problem you're trying to solve? And I think that's what's so wonderful about working with high school students, because they do dream very big, and they also look around them and they say, these are the issues in my community that I would like to make an impact on. So it's got to start with the interest of the student.
Okay, sparking interest is one thing, but we also want to lead to creativity and innovation. So a lot of debate has been going around, but can you really inculcate innovative thinking? Some say you're born with it, some say you can acquire it from the environment. So with the highest exposure, especially in science, how should we look at it now if we have this exposure? And we must acknowledge that at the same time, it's not just the few that we're looking at, but we want to inspire the whole nation. So how can others partake in this vision? That we'll discuss after this short break. anda masih menonton agenda Awani dan saya berbicara dalam bahasa Inggeris kerana sebenarnya kita bercerita tentang bagaimana untuk kita merintis pemikiran masyarakat kita menuju ke arah melahirkan saintis-saintis dan penyelidik bertaraf tinggi untuk memenangi hadiah Nobel. Bukanlah akhirnya itu tujuannya menang hadiah Nobel, tapi tingginya tahap penyelidikan dan ilmu sains yang ada dalam negara. Dan oleh itu, I would like to continue into the next round of looking at how do we spark creativity and innovative thinking, because I'm sure New York Academy of Science and your own personal career has gone through from the public school to right up to the leading institutions in America, and this is an issue I think which is universal in nature. And what's your experience in this? Because too many times we think that we can put them somewhere in a classroom and then we can instill it into them, but sometimes great innovation come from very unpredictable moments. And this was even shared by the Nobel winners in Stockholm itself.
Right.
So what are your views on that?
Well, it's interesting. When we look at creativity and innovative thinking, what you often find are people who are very technically proficient. So if you were to look at someone like Pablo Picasso, he was very technically proficient, even though his most famous works of art look very simple. And the same thing with someone like Albert Einstein. He was very technically proficient, and there was a certain elegance to his work. But when you become technically proficient, and you are creative or unique, you then can turn around and create ideas and share ideas that are very different. Now, I think, and there's some research to back this up, that everybody is quite creative and everybody is quite innovative in their thinking. And what you need to do is not necessarily teach people how to do that, but what you need to do is give them permission to be creative and incentivize creative thinking. So if you think about something like the MacArthur Genius Award, that is an award that is given to people that have very innovative and creative ideas. So the tension in school is that you want everybody to learn a certain curriculum, right? You want everybody to be able to pass their test. And at a large scale, like a public school system, you know, not everybody can be Pablo Picasso. But what we need to do is also take advantage of all the other opportunities that students have. And parents can do things like put their children into summer programs and weekend programs, and also really encourage them to be creative and encourage their teachers to really think about innovative thinking as something that can be rewarded, instead of thinking about working to make sure kids get the right answers on the test all the time and sort of put their thinking in a box. What we need to do is really incentivize them and give them opportunities to be creative and to give them almost permission to do that. And I think we need to do the same things in science. And we can do that very easily by funding what we think of as high-risk, high-reward science. Basically what that means is you provide a proposal that's kind of a wacky, out there idea that's not necessarily within the mainstream of science, but you have someone who has an excellent research background and kind of this far-out idea, and provide amounts of money that will allow them to pursue those ideas. And I think that small amount of incentive is very powerful in getting people to continue to be creative throughout their whole life.
Permission to be creative and innovative. The fact that we have to give permission, you know, because in the old days when I was growing up in this very quaint little village up north in our rice bowl, my grandfather led the way because he didn't have any formal education, but he can give subsistence to the family because he used the skills of the hand and the mind to work with the environment, protein from rivers, protein from the birds and whatever. But once we transfer this issue onto the curriculum, like you said, into a system in school, and I'm asking you to wear the hat of a vice chancellor now, who have to receive students after 11 years in our education system, and at this very moment, today, the blueprint, the new education blueprint is already tabled to the cabinet. So maybe it's insightful to look at that. And what would your wishes be? Because at the end of the day, by the time they enter university, they already have a preset mind of the pathway that I've been talking about in the first block. But how would you look at it in terms of creativity and innovation, now being exposed to all the New York Academy of Sciences programs that we should be looking at in our school?
Yeah, firstly, I think students should not be stopped from asking questions. I think that's number one. Here, you ask too many questions in class, the teachers don't like it, for example. So the students stop asking questions. Then they stop asking questions, they stop thinking. When you stop thinking, you're not creative anymore. So I think from the beginning, for creativity to happen, they are creative. For it to be manifested, I think you have to encourage students to speak their mind, to say what they want to say, and to be safe. I think the problem is they're not safe. The environment is not safe for them to experiment, to do things differently, and that is what will encourage creativity in their thinking. The other one, I think, is you cannot like compartmentalize science and arts.
I think streaming it.
Yes, I think we do too much of that. You know, that science students are not even exposed to, say, performing arts, to literature, to writing. Because I find a lot of the students, they may be science, but they're very creative. They can play musical instruments well, they write well, for example. Similarly, with the students we stream into the arts, then they are not exposed to science. So how do you make science interesting to society, or even for them to appreciate science when they're not exposed? So I think it has to start at a very basic level.
Great points, but I have to go for the last break. But once we are back, you're good in biology and you're also actively in theatre, for example, Dr. Groome. So maybe you can share with us experiences on ground that's being practiced in schools in America. And why is it the outreach by New York Academy of Science to the public side of things? I mean, you're also looking at the website and portal for education of science, MYAS, and you're looking at engagement with the city itself. So now scientists, even at Nobel level, they are going out and reaching out. So there must be an initial there. And let's take that example after this short break. I have to rush a bit because there's always little time when we talk about great things, great people. But I want to learn from the experiences, garnered by New York Academy of Science in reaching out to schools, to public communities, in trying to put across the message that science is for everybody, to spark that interest. And you've made the point where maybe in this country we've been streaming too much. So if you're into arts, that means you're no good in science at all. But even a musician can use mathematics to, enhance his skills, for example, and the other way around. So what has been done right by the initiative by MYAS that you can pick out maybe the selling points and share with us for us to not reinvent the wheel, but just move on?
Sure. Well, I think it's important that while here we're talking about students who will likely or who would like to pursue research careers, which means a PhD, 70% of the jobs that are out there for anybody are going to require a good knowledge in science, technology, engineering, and math. So while we are talking about students who are reaching for PhDs, everybody and anybody is going to need to have STEM competency. And I'll use the example of my sister, who is a ballerina, and she uses math every day. She uses physiology every day. So she has a job that wouldn't seem anything like something that requires math and science, yet she needs it every single day. I think the best initiatives in the States, and I mean, I've been all over the world, I've seen these initiatives all over the place, the best examples give kids an opportunity to look ahead and meet the people who they may become, whether they're young scientists, whether they're older scientists, whether they're people like me who have a science background who went into teaching, gives them an opportunity to actually understand all the different careers that are out there for them and see, maybe try them on, maybe do an internship, maybe do an apprenticeship, maybe do a placement in a laboratory. And high school students really don't have that many experiences, and so in order to help them understand what they want, the best initiatives give them a chance to put on their lab coat, to put on their stethoscope, to try their hand at being an engineer. And a good life is one that is led by trying many, many different things and understanding what one does not like until you find something that you do like. So you're never going to fall in love with a particular career until perhaps you've tried a couple of different ones. And so I think the best initiatives try to find a way in which students can meet perhaps their future self. And then as high school students, they can also serve as role models and mentor for essentially their younger self, for middle school children and elementary school children. And I think that continuity is really what helps people serve as leaders, develop leadership skills, and also then think about what sort of positions they want when they get older.
I guess seeing is believing. And if kids in high school can sit down with a Nobel laureate, and actually the Nobel laureate says that I'm learning something from you.
Yes.
So that's the greatest spark. And we should open up the wrappers, this invisible perception that people have that Nobel laureates are way up there. Because in Lindau, for example, when it was about physiology that I attended, I sat down with Swan for an interview, and he said that when he was young, before he took his medical degree, he was backpacking across Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore. So I'm like, is this backpacker can now, decades later, sit in front of me as a Nobel winner? And he was looking at how molecule of waters transfer messages across the cell. The inspiration needs to come from somewhere, and it must be self-generated. But to generate that spark, you need to expose the youngsters to as many things as possible.
Yeah, and I think there's an important point for parents here. There's some excellent research out there that says when we interview people who have become successful scientists, many of them look back to experiences they had when they were younger children, and their experiences of going to the zoo, going to the science museum, meeting an astronaut, going to a laboratory. So parents need to think about their children at quite young ages and give them an opportunity to
different experiences.
You're quite encouraged by the response of the 80 students that you've seen, right?
Yes. Yes, I think we have 80 Nobel laureates on our hands, just to warn everybody in Stockholm.
That's way above outstanding KPI for the country. Before we close, about 30 seconds, Prof, we've talked about a lot of things, but at the end of the day, you know, if there's one thing that you think we can start changing tomorrow to produce Nobel winners, for example, in education, and changing the system, because I'm sure there's a lot of parents listening here and say, yeah, it's fine hearing this, but once I send them to school tomorrow, it looks like such a tall hurdle.
No, I think the school system is going to change with the reforms that we have been doing. It depends a lot on the teachers, and that's why teachers, they are a crucial part of the three groups that we have. And it's the teacher who will, you know, if a child wants to know about a Nobel laureate, it's the teacher who will call up the scientists or whoever.
We have 10,000 schools almost, so there are thousands of teachers that can come to UKM.
Yeah, we can replicate this experience.
So contact UKM. I'll blast them on astroawani.com, and you can have a bridge to the Permata Pintar program and this initiative with
Yes, you can have our Twitter handle as well.
I'll put that all in astroawani.com, I promise. Terima kasih banyak kerana telah menonton. Hantarkan pandangan anda sendiri ke Astro Awani, sama ada pergi ke portal astroawani.com ataupun teruskan saja ke Twitter dan Facebook Astro Awani, dan kita jumpa lagi dengan isu-isu yang menarik dalam agenda Awani. Sekian, selamat malam dan terima kasih. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.